Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm so glad you came. You're really showing that you really care about the great city of Florissant. My job is very simple tonight. We had some council members see our speaker at a municipal league meeting. I've always encouraged the council to attend the Missouri Municipal League and the County Municipal League, which they have done. And they saw our speaker at one of our municipal league meetings last summer, and they were very impressed and thought this would be an opportunity to be a catalyst for us to think outside the box and look for some new ideas for a brighter future. I'm going to introduce Jackie Pagano, our council president, and she'll take it from here. Jackie.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're as excited as I am for this. So I just want to tell you that we are so happy that you're here. And I would like to introduce the council members that are here, and that would be Andrew Harris from Ward 1, Tim Jones, Ward 2, Joe Egan, Ward 3, Vice President Jeff Caputo, Ward 4, Keith Schildroth, Ward 5, Gerard Hankey, Ward 6, Robert Parson, Ward 8, and Tommy Siam, Ward 9. And others that I would like to thank now, before we start, who were such a big help getting this going, would be Chief Tim Lowry, Cheryl Entwistle, Andy Quionis, Karen Goodwin, the theater department, Todd Schmidt, and our entire parks department. So please give them a round of applause. Thank you. So I'm going to start with that. I hope you had a chance to view the exhibition boards in the gymnasium. They were created by students from Washington University and Harris Stowe State University under the direction of Catalina Frisia and Mark Abbott. The course is Segregation by Design, and the purpose of the course was to examine the causes and consequences of segregation in St. Louis, as well as to propose potential mitigation strategies. The course is divided into two parts. The first part is a series of lectures and panel discussions involving prominent academics, policymakers, and practitioners throughout the St. Louis metropolitan region. The second part entails the development of neighborhood mitigation plans produced by student teams assisted by professional mentors. The aim of the plans is to outline possible strategies for addressing segregation in select communities. The exhibit boards highlight the findings and recommendations from the neighborhood study to date. And I know Catalina is here this evening, which I'm so happy that she was able to attend, and I would like to thank her for allowing us to display her, the artwork this evening. So now, to tell you a little bit about our presenter, which I'm going to let him do his bio, but it's been about a year ago, and Councilman Jones and Councilman Caputo and I did attend the Missouri Municipal League Convention. And if any of you have been on a convention, sometimes our attention span isn't that long, you know, and we will remember little bits. But saying that we did this a year ago, I cannot tell you the impression that Jason Roberts left on us, that still to this day we remember the presentation. So with that, we were so excited to tell the rest of the council how Jason revitalized a neighborhood with one simple thought and turned it into so much more. As the enthusiasm peaked, we, the council as a whole, decided to share it with you, our community, to hope to share in our vision that we can make a change and that we do in Florissant have strong roots and a strong foundation. And if we all work together, great things can come. So please give Jason a warm welcome and let him know what Florissant's about. Thank you.
All right, can you all hear me okay? Great, all right, it's great to be here. I'm from Dallas, Texas, so I'm grateful to be away from the 175-degree weather we're having right now. and be here. So my Uber driver's like, I'm afraid it's going to rain. I feel bad. Like, this is wonderful. This is great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the work I do around the Better Block and show you kind of what my inspirations were for the work. And then what kind of led to the work that we're doing now in cities all around the world. And to let you know a little bit about my background, I was not kind of the guy that was supposed to be fixing things in the community. I just thought, how do I make a better place for my kids and my family? And things snowballed faster than I ever imagined. So let me see if my remote works here. Let me just do it by the screen here. All right. So I'll start with kind of this image that I use a lot for pictures. This is in Montmartre, Paris. And I remember when I first saw this picture, I remember thinking, man, I wish this was in my neighborhood. If it was there, I'd go there every single day. I'd have a cup of coffee here. I'd want to retire around here. I love the little streets. I love the little landscaping around it. And I asked my friends, what do you think about places that look like this? And they said, yeah, we wish we had it too. We put it on our postcards. We want our kids to work there. And I thought, well, if we all wish we had more places that look like this, then why do we keep building places that look like this? That was the early inspiration for our work. So we looked at this and thought, we build this stuff all over the place. And we don't care about these things. We don't care if it goes away tomorrow. That we just feel kind of like a commodity here. That's not a place that we're going to celebrate. It's not a place that we're going to put on our postcards. And it's interesting, you guys have all seen this. You go to your old downtowns and around the country, and you'll see these beautiful courthouses that our great-great-grandparents built that are still beautiful and still inspiring us. Then you see these metal fabricated buildings that we're building now, and those are our new city halls and our new courthouses. So what happened? Why did we make that shift? Why did we decide the places that we build as a community just don't matter as much anymore? We don't care about those legacies. Then I started also looking around for places that were working for thousands of years. I don't know if anyone's been to Rome before, but as an example, you can look at some of their plazas. Again, this is an example of a 2,000-year-old plaza that's been working and still works to this day with young people, old people, markets, fountains. It's full of life. And then I went to Holland. I saw grandparents riding bicycles with their grandkids. And these little streets with all these little shops. So I saw all these places that were built with a legacy. They were built with these long-term thoughts in mind about these places that we love and we want to celebrate. So I get on an airplane. I go back to Dallas. I'm like, okay, what are we building? What are we spending all of our time, our energy, and our money on for our future generations? What's our legacies? And I saw a lot of these things. I was kind of depressed because I thought we're spending billions of dollars on a place that I'll never be able to ride a bicycle with my grandchild here. I'll never be able to have a cup of coffee outside here and linger and enjoy this space, right? So I wanted to make change. I thought, okay, I want to go out. I'm going to get involved with the city and see if I can make things happen in my community. The problem was I wasn't an urban planner. I wasn't an architect. I was your IT guy. I would have been at your houses taking viruses off your computers. I would have been here setting up this projector, setting up these screens. That's what I did for a living. So I didn't even know where to begin, where to get started. And the other problem I faced was the city said, well, you know what? First of all, Jason, Dallas is not Paris. It's a car culture. We all drive. People aren't going to go walking outside and playing accordions and eating cheese and drinking wine. But I thought, well, you know what? It's interesting because I found other places around the world that actually had the same issues we faced. This is actually in Copenhagen, where you can see they let their beautiful old classic squares be kind of taken over by cars and by mopeds. But the community and the city leaders said this isn't actually the right way to build a place. We need to make places for people more. So they started slowly readapting these spaces and making them for people again. Now if you go, you'll see there are these beautiful pedestrian zones that are working, and they're working well. The other issue I faced was too, people said, well, it's too hot in Dallas. People are never going to go outside. And so the interesting thing is, we blame heat on a lot of issues. We blame climate on a lot of issues all around the country. But I thought, it gets hot in Austin. It gets hot in New Orleans, and people go outside. People also blame the cold or why they can't go outside. But this is, I took this picture in Lithuania, in Vilnius, and it's just, you see they put space heaters out. They put this great little awning. They put out lounge chairs that have soft blankets and mulled wine. And the interesting thing is I learned a saying from the Danish that said, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. So I thought we had to figure out, how do we change, why are we making these excuses for why we're not going to make great places? Because other places have the same issues we face, but they decide to invest in the people. and figure out how to make beautiful and irresistible places for people, not for just transportation to get in and out of a space only. And so I started looking for, I started to want to get involved with the city, and so I went to City Hall, and they said, you know what, you can get involved with one of our planning commissions. You can join a committee. You can be a volunteer. So we had 4 Dallas plans you can get involved with. That's looking at the comprehensive plan for the entire city, or there's downtown 360 plan, just the downtown area. You can pull out the 2011 bike plan. We never did anything with that, so maybe pull that out and look at that for a while. You can get involved with the 2035 mobility plan. I thought, wow, Dallas is going to be great in 2035. I hope I make it, right? So I was trying to figure out, there's got to be a way to make a great place now. I don't want to wait 30 years for a great place. I want a great place in 30 days. My kids are growing up, and I want to enjoy this with them, and I want to celebrate these spaces that we have now. So I started looking at other inspiration for people that were making change quick. And I found a group in Berlin of these students that were going out to these blighted areas around their city. And they were taking places like the old train stop that people didn't like to go by, that was scary and it was full of graffiti. And over a weekend, they had turned it into an opera house. And then I found this group in England of these other students that were taking these derelict gas stations, wrapped around with these kind of chain link fences. And they would take these and they would turn them into a movie house with their neighbors. And then closer to home in the U.S., I found this interesting group of folks that were taking parking meters in San Francisco. They're saying, we're putting quarters in these meters, and we're just putting cars here, but if we're putting money in the meter, we don't necessarily have to put a car here. We can put anything. We basically get to lease this space. And so they would turn these into little small parks just for a few hours. And then probably the most notable example was the crossroads of the world in New York, in Times Square. As you guys know, this was where you had cabs coming through everywhere, you had cars everywhere at this beautiful major intersection in New York City. But the city looked at this and said, we have a lot of pedestrians here too, but they're actually being kind of pushed off to the sides here. They can't really use this space. Like, we could probably take over one of these major arteries that we're giving over to cars and make it for pedestrians. And when they pitched the idea, because they said the numbers looked right to make this work, but the businesses thought, this is not going to work, this is going to be the end of the world as we know it, and then the traffic management was saying this is going to be Carmageddon, this isn't going to work. So the city said, let's just test it out. Let's try it out for a few months. We'll do a temporary kind of test. What we'll do is we'll go out to Walmart, we'll buy a bunch of folding chairs, we'll put them out in the middle of the street, and see if anybody uses them. And what happened was a lot of people used them, right? They filled up that street, and they said it was so successful. And the businesses didn't fail. In fact, they did even better. Traffic didn't clog, and just people still kind of came through the area. And so they made the changes permanent. And you see that if you go there now. It's this beautiful kind of pedestrian zone. So I thought, okay, I want to get started on something in my own neighborhood. Where can I get started? So one of the issues I faced, I live in a neighborhood called Oak Cliff, which is kind of considered the bad part of town in Dallas. Part of the reason it was thought of as the bad part of town is that we had a stigma because we'd had a lot of bad folks from my neighborhood. So first of all, Bonnie and Clyde are from my neighborhood. And also Lee Harvey Oswald's from my neighborhood. In fact, this theater was ground zero for why we were considered the bad part of town. This is actually where the Texas Theater, this is where Lee Harvey Oswald was captured after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The only reason we had a sign on it was because Oliver Stone built that sign from the movie JFK. And I started going out to the theater, and I talked to the board that was running it and said, hey, I want to get involved with this. And they said, well, we need $3 million to fix it. And I said, I don't have $3 million. And they said, well, nobody's giving us money because people don't want to come to the bad side of town. So I said, why don't I just get with my friends, and I'll see if I can just bring the neighbors out. And we'll get together, and we'll have everybody paint. We'll give them all canvases. And we'll have them come into the theater and paint together as a community on the floor, just like in this room. We'll come out together, and then we'll hang up the art, and we'll turn the theater into this instant art gallery. So we'll collectively fix the theater as a community. So I got together with my friends, and we're building these easels. And minutes before we're about to open the doors, we started thinking, this is going to be an abject failure. What were we thinking? It's the middle of winter. We're in the bad side of town in a theater that's been closed for 10 years. But what happened when we opened the doors was we had 700 people show up. We sold every piece of art we had created the night before. But beyond that, people came up to me and said, we've been waiting for someone to open this old building up again. I thought, I was waiting for somebody too. Are we all collectively just waiting for someone to help us kind of use these spaces? And I realized we all are. In fact, so I started showing up to say, I want to keep helping. I want to get more involved. And so within 3 months, I became the president of the Texas Theater. So I tell people, be careful when you say you want to help, because people will throw the keys at you. But we didn't have a screen at first. So I found a screen in someone's backyard, one of our friends' backyards. We hung it up as a neighborhood. And then we didn't have a sound system. So we thought, well, let's just get a piano from Craigslist. Brought a piano in. And we'll just play silent films and have neighbors perform piano to the silent films. And so after we exhausted the entire Charlie Chaplin catalog, we had enough money to actually buy a sound system. And now the theater is working, and it's working well. It's an anchor for our area. We still haven't got that $3 million, but it's iteratively being built and rebuilt and being fixed. There's a film festival that happens regularly. We have famous actors come in all the time and celebrate the space with us. So, drunk with enthusiasm and thinking, wow, if I can help bring back an old theater with the neighbors, what else can we bring back? I started looking at old maps at the library. And I started looking at about what we used to have. And I realized one of the major issues that we faced was we had an old streetcar system, a trolley that ran throughout our neighborhood. And when we pulled the trolley car out, it created a lot of problems. So first of all, I had 650 seats at the Texas Theater, but only 35 parking spaces. So when you take the trolley car out, I had nowhere for the cars to park at that point. The only way I could find parking was to tear down the great old buildings around us, which was going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. It's going to kill this beautiful area that we love, this Main Street form, and just create this kind of moonscape of surface parking lots all around us. So I started attending a lot of meetings. I joined every club. Kiwanis, I'm a Lion, I'm a Mason, I'm everything. And I started saying, talking about ideas for how do we get people to move back to our neighborhood and do things. And people had a lot of ideas. Everyone said, we know what we need? We need a Chipotle. If we get a Chipotle, everyone's going to move back for the Chipotle. Or if we get a Whole Foods, everyone's going to move back as soon as we get the Whole Foods here. I said, hey, I've got an idea. Why don't we bring back that trolley car system that we had? And people laughed and said, you can't bring back a trolley car. We're the bad side of town. It's been gone for half a century. We know nothing about trolleys. And I knew nothing about trolleys, but I was an IT guy. I knew how to make websites. So I went home that night and made a fake website called the Oak Cliff Transit Authority. That looked really official. Had boards and news and histories and European trams on the front. And the next week, the Dallas Morning News did a story saying, dreaming of the day the streetcars return. That's what Jason Roberts and other members of the recently formed Oak Cliff Transit Authority are hoping. But there were no other members. It was just me. But I had a lot of people call me in my neighborhood and said, we got a transit authority? This is great. I thought, well, no, but I want to advocate for trying to bring this back. So I had people say, hey, actually, I'm a civil engineer, and I would love to donate some time to do a pro bono feasibility study. And I had this one quirky guy that was like 80 years old that loved his streetcars. He had enough parts in his garage to build a trolley. So I had this little interesting army that we assembled and said, let's kind of move this ball forward. So while we're doing this, we'll start trying to think of other projects we can take on, because this is going to take us 20 or 30 years. So while that's going on, why don't we try to look at maybe that bicycle stuff I saw whenever I was over in Holland. The thing is, though, when we talked about bicycling in Texas, in Dallas, it wasn't what I saw there in Europe, where I saw girls in dresses and guys in suits riding just their old heavy bikes to the grocery store or the post office. We didn't know how to bicycle that way. The way we celebrated bicycling, and when we talked about bicycling, what we would do is we wear spandex, we'd start doping, and we'd go 300 miles. That's the only bicycling we knew how to do in our neighborhood. So we said, well, let's create another group. We'll call it Bike Friendly Oak Cliff, and just kind of celebrate the idea of bringing back, getting people to ride their old Schwinn's that are in the garage, and dust them off. We'll go out, and we'll come out together, and we'll ride bicycles. And I started to show up to City Hall. And I thought we were the guy that shows up at City Hall and says, hey, I've got this great idea. We've got this new group. We're going to take all of our roads throughout the city. We're going to cut them in half and put beautiful bike lanes everywhere. You're going to have a lot of people that look like this that come out and say, no! No, you're not. So I realized, okay, I'm going to have to come up with another idea, because this guy's probably not going to want to ride a bicycle, right? So we started saying, well, why don't we just get everyone to come out and go out for a fun history ride? You'll go out, join us, and we'll go out and we didn't know what to celebrate in our neighborhood. We didn't have a lot to celebrate. So let's go just follow the trail of Lee Harvey Oswald. So we thought if we're lucky, we'll have 20 people show up to ride their old heavy bikes to the grocery store, or to go out to ride on this history ride. But what happened was we had 150 people show up to that first ride. And what you don't see is me at the front of this line, first of all, looking terrified, because I didn't own a bicycle when we started Bike Friendly Oak Cliff. I just love the idea of having a bike culture. And second of all, I thought, I'm not the leader of a movement. I don't need to be leading anything. I'm your IT guy, right? But I found if you're passionate about something, you have everything it takes to become a leader. And people are waiting for someone to stand up in the neighborhood and say, hey, things are not working. Things used to be better. Things are broken now. The streets are broken down. We can't take care of these things. There's got to be a better way for us to do things in our communities. And so I started doing little projects to try to embolden this bike culture. So one of the things I did is I worked in my kids' school, and I said, no kids are riding bicycles. One of the things I noticed, there weren't even bike racks at their school. So I said, why don't I make punch cards? And I'll give these to the kids. And if they ride every day for 5 days, for a week, we'll go out together and we'll just have root beer floats with a big group ride. We went from having 0 kids ride when we first started to having 100 within a week. And all we did was make punch cards. So I started, I'm working on the theater, and I'm working on the trolley car, working on the bicycle network. So I started looking at the old blocks of buildings that weren't working. And started thinking, well, why aren't these working? How do I get these up and running? So I noticed there were some issues. First of all, we changed the zoning from retail to light industrial when we took the trolley car out, because again, there wasn't enough parking. So where were we going to put the cars? And then we made the streets high-speed, one-way streets, which whenever you do that, you widen your streets and make them high-speed, you actually separate the neighborhoods, and people don't feel connected anymore. They don't actually feel that they belong to this other neighborhood. Then we took away the landscaping, we thinned the sidewalks, and we created a lot of laws and rules that either made it illegal or cost prohibitive to make this place come back to life. And you don't have to read all this, but just know we had laws that said, well, flowers on the sidewalk, $1,000 in permitting. If you want shade awnings for each window, $1,000 per window. If you want to have street cafes, it's going to be $1,000 times area, times market value, times 85%, times 12%. I have no idea what that is. If you want merchandise on the sidewalk, so book stalls, bicycles out of the front of the bike shop, or clothes out in front of the clothing store, that's illegal. And if you really want to kill your street life, create a law that says it's illegal for crowds to gather on the sidewalk. We had all those rules, and they were all from 1941. So we looked at this block that we had, and we said, well, obviously it's illegal for us to do anything to make this come back to life. So what would happen if we gathered up our neighbors, we took a weekend, and we broke every law we possibly could? So that's what we did. We painted our own bike lanes. We added our own cafe seating. We put murals on our buildings. We put string lights across the street. We went and took the empty buildings and put the businesses we always wanted to have in our neighborhood. Coffee shops, bookstores, bike shops, art spaces for our kids. And then we printed off all the laws and the rules we were breaking. We put in the windows, and we invited our city staff and our mayor and said, hey, come out to our better block. We thought, oh, man, we're all going to go to jail. And they came out, and they said, man, I don't know if we're supposed to be here. But at the end of the day, they looked at this and they said, there's hundreds of people out using the spaces now again. People are walking here, and they're celebrating this place again. And we haven't done that in years and decades. And so they started making a lot of changes based on this project that we did. We just did this on a weekend. So first of all, they changed all of the zoning, went back from light industrial, went back to retail. And then we started reducing all those fees. So instead of doing $1,000 for cafe seating, we'll make it $100. So that way it's not so cost prohibitive. And we started seeing a lot of things happen after that. First of all the empty buildings that had been empty for years got leased. So people said, well, that's great. But you did that when it was nice outside. But again, remember in Dallas, it gets 100 degrees 3 months out of the year. So I thought, let's try this again. We'll take another block. No sidewalks on one side, broken up sidewalks on the other side. There's a pole with nothing on it. Just kind of this gray ugliness, right? So we thought, how do we cool this area down and make people want to linger in this space in 100 degrees? So we brought our neighbors together again. Took another weekend. We brought out 42 trees. Brought 100 bushes to create pedestrian islands. People would feel safer crossing the street, and cars would slow through the area. And then we took the pallets from the trash behind the buildings. We made decks so people could sit outside. We painted our own crosswalks. You're not supposed to do that. We added bicycles to the pole. And then lastly, we put tables under the trees. And people came out, and they would not leave. In fact, we had people coming out with their kids and strollers, and they're calling their friends saying, you've got to get out here. This looks like Vancouver. This does not look like Dallas. And the amazing thing was we just did this on a weekend. And so this was just temporary for us to test out that idea. So this is the block being used. And the thing is, we had a lot of architects come into our neighborhood and do all these charrettes and designs and planning initiatives and give us all these renderings that ended up being folded up and putting it on shelves in City Hall that never got built. So we suffered from what we called rendering fatigue. The amazing thing was with this project is we just took the time and energy it takes to draw pictures, and we just built it ourselves. Those aren't Photoshop trees, they're real trees. Those are real crosswalks that we built as a neighborhood. Those are real bicycles when people said people went right outside because it's 100 degrees outside. The other interesting thing was we just did this on a weekend, so a lot of people came out from around the region who had never been out to our neighborhood before. And they drove here, they're in this space, they're enjoying it, they said, this is wonderful. They go back home. They came back the next weekend with their friends. They got to come back and see this beautiful block. They're driving around like it's right around here. There was trees, there was shops, where'd it go? So again, we just took it away to show people what the potential could be. But what happened was it educated everybody on the value of why we needed these things. We had seniors from our neighborhood that remember how the block used to look back in the 20s and 30s and said, this is the way it used to be. This is the way we remember all of our families used to gather on these spaces. We had all these little businesses in here. So we were able to basically bring back what we'd already created in the past that we'd slowly disassembled over time. So one of the other issues, the other things that we found that was important for us was that we had to work fast. We had to figure out a way to make things happen. When people had ideas in the neighborhood, they got pushed through kind of a bureaucratic system, and they got deflated, and they would give up. So we thought, well, how do we just test out some of these ideas? Because we don't do a lot of things because we come up with all these worst-case scenarios, why it's going to be the end of the world if we make some of these changes. So we had one group that wanted to do a dog park. And they went to the city council member. City council member talked to city staff. And they said, well, to do dog parks, we can't see a lot of rules here. I think we need 3 contiguous acres of land, which we did not have in our inner city neighborhood. And then we're going to do all these studies. It's going to take us years and millions of dollars. So the group was frustrated, and they were going to give up. They came up to us and said, okay, what would you guys do? And I'm standing across the street from this field that basically was overgrown with weeds, and people are throwing trash in, and they're dumping in the area. And I thought, well, this is only 1 acre, but why don't we turn this into like a pop-up dog park, and we'll show how we can test out the idea and show that there's value there and people want to do it, and we can manage it and take care of it easier because it's in the neighborhood, and it's only 1 acre. I said, well, that's great. We'll gather up the group that we have here, and we'll have several meetings, and we'll raise some money, and maybe 5 or 6 months we'll do a dog park. And I said, well, why don't we just do it next weekend? So that's what we did. We went in and just mowed the grass, and we put mulch down. We copied the city of Dallas's official park signs and made our own park signs. And then we studied dog parks around the world to figure out, well, what makes a dog park a dog park? Because it must be really complex. It's going to cost us millions of dollars and take years. So the secret to making a dog park, if you guys are curious about what it is, if you know how to build a fence, you can make a dog park. And we figured that out. So people also ask me, what happens when you're breaking all those laws and rules? This is my friend Scott, who ended up printing off all the laws and rules that we broke. Scott is now our city council member. So I found there's a 1-to-1 correlation between breaking laws and becoming a public servant. So cover your ears, council members. So one of the other interesting things that was important for us was that the city of Dallas's motto was think big. And so we were frustrated with that because we found that what think big meant was we're going to hire an Italian architect who's going to design us a bridge that looks like a fish skeleton that we're going to put out, and we hope it's going to make 100 little things happen in our neighborhood. But found the places that we love in the world, all right, whether it's in London or Paris or Dallas or Johannesburg, wherever it's at, there are often these little blocks that we go to regularly. Now, they're not these giant iconic things. There's these small spaces that have the little bakery, the little cafe, the flower shop, the bookstore, the places for our kids to play. They have benches, they've got water features, they've got maps and directories, they've got community art. And as a neighborhood, we can build 100 little things a lot faster than this one giant thing that we help fix it ourselves. And the amazing thing is the city came out and looked at this and said, this makes a lot of sense, actually. You guys are going out here, you're gathering data, you're gathering the neighborhood together, you're testing an idea, we're getting real data, we're seeing how things are happening. This makes a lot of sense. We should actually start looking at these ideas. And so the city started sanctioning us and hiring us to do this work. But it was really fascinating because we started off as very guerrilla, very not sanctioned. In fact, kind of our joke was people asked us, how did you end up breaking all those laws and rules in broad daylight? I said, I thought you can break any rule you want as long as you wear an orange vest. So after we were sanctioned by cities and we were asked to kind of do these things, we had to start, becoming more mindful of like, okay, how do we work with cities to embrace this idea of gathering neighborhoods together and getting around this worst-case scenarios and naysaying and these assumptions on what we can or what we can't do or who we are or who we aren't. And let's just test some ideas and see what happens when we build things together as a neighborhood. Let's start swinging hammers again together because we forgot how to build. So now what we do is we work in cities all over. And this is an example of a project that we do. And I think an example that's reflective of most of the work that we do, in fact. This is out of Akron, Ohio. And the story of Akron is fascinating when we were brought out here. And we were brought out by the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. So and those of you who know Akron will know that Akron used to be the tire capital of the world. So all the cars were made in Detroit, and all the tires were made in Akron. So everything you heard about that happened in Detroit also happened to Akron. So depopulation, loss of industry, excess buildings that that people weren't using, roadways that were overbuilt with the assumption that population would continue to grow in perpetuity. So we go to these places and we'll meet with neighbors and we'll start asking them, like, who's here right now? Who's still here? Who can we work with and how can we help make it a great place? Because people still deserve great places. And let's build it with the skills and the resources of the people that are here, as opposed to coming up with some outside idea like the Chipotle or whatever else is that we're going to fix this. Let's use what we've got in our neighborhood and make these places ours again and celebrate who we are and make them work. And so we'll gather the neighborhood. And this neighborhood was interesting because there were Bhutanese refugees that were moving into the area, and we had a lot of Italian immigrants too. So we thought, okay, let's work with these two communities, and we'll start cataloging the street. We started identifying the block. We started identifying all the empty buildings. We talked to the property owners and said, let's use your spaces temporarily. We're going to put some pop-up businesses with the neighbors that want to test out their business idea. We have the Bhutanese lady that wants to try to run a restaurant. We have an older Italian man that wants to start his own coffee business. Then we took all the empty spaces between the buildings and let's make those into beautiful public spaces, and let's take those wide streets that we can't take care of anymore, and let's build bike lanes so we can bring more people into the space, and let's add shade trees to those. So we started working with the city's official equipment and then fill it up with kids' finger paint. And we take white duct tape with the residents, and within 2 hours we can make bike lanes like the ones they saw in New York, but they thought they could never get. We line those with shade trees. We could take, add crosswalks. We could test out the idea of mid-block crossings, because the city didn't think that this would work, so let's test it out, and it worked really well. We took an empty lot, been empty for, again, half a century. Just took some soil, some hay bales and volunteers, and we turned it into an Italian plaza. We turned the turn lanes into bocce ball courts with the Italian fraternal order. Bocce. We took old bank buildings that had been empty for years with these wide streets. And they're like, how do we fix this? And I said, we have a bunch of old tires, because we're Akron. We have some paint. So I said, well, let's take those tires and paint, and let's make it into a beautiful plaza. Let's take the empty buildings and put vinyl decals on them to show the businesses that we want to have in these spaces. Let's take the buildings that we're slating to demolish and put businesses with the neighborhood as well. These intersections that we can take again and make them into safer places for pedestrians to cross. Slow the cars. When you slow the cars, you make a place that people want to sit outside, have that cafe seating environment. In fact, there's an interesting metric that Copenhagen came up with. They said, we found if you want to show the people that our city is improving and improving quality of life, we want to see an exponential increase in cafe seating year over year. So as a metric, it's funny, when you make that, you put that out there, you have to do a lot of things to hit that mark. First of all, you start having shade trees and lighting. You add seats outside and food options for people. And you make the kind of places that we want to be in the first place. And this is the block actually being used. So just a few hours before, the people that are riding this bike lane were helping us build it. But beyond that, they were all residents that lived within just blocks of this intersection. And I thought, we never imagined ever wanting to come out here. We never thought it could be a place we'd ever want to be and celebrate. And it's amazing that within a weekend, we transformed it into the place that we want to put on postcards again, that our great-great-grandparents built. Places that we have the skills to make those things that we want to put on our postcards again. And we can do this in all types of environments, and we've done this all over. This is an example. We did a project in South Dallas early on, and we went to this community, and it was highly impoverished. There was a large drug use. There was liquor stores on every corner, and you could see that there were like old phone booths that were empty, weeds overgrown. But the neighborhood, there were still kids there, and there were families there, and they said, we want this to be a great place. So we had to figure out, like, how can we fall in love with this place? How can we fall in love with the space? And what we could fall in love with was the people. So we just started riding bicycles around, and we found out, okay, there's a lot of, in this neighborhood, there was a lot of these little shotgun churches. So we thought, okay, and we could hear on Wednesday nights, we heard these gospel choirs practicing. So we got gospel music. We saw guys smoking barbecue in their front yards, often because the gas had been shut off, because, again, it was an impoverished neighborhood. So we got barbecue as well. So why don't we get together, and we'll do a Better Block gospel barbecue. And we'll celebrate what the neighborhood already does well. And we'll put it out there, and we'll try to fix the street as well. So we took that ugly street, and we turned it into a beautiful street. We landscaped it. We made better crosswalks. And we put in small businesses with the barbecue guys that were barbecuing out in front of their house and said, why don't you just bring it out to the street? And we took those gospel choirs, and we put them out to the street as well. So we had people that were coming into the area that were from around the region that said, I would get on an airplane and go 3 or 4 hours to experience what was in my own backyard. I had no idea what was here. And the residents in the neighborhood said, this is what we do all the time. We had no idea this was our unique differentiator that could bring people out and get us a new economy going and get a lot of things happening again. People buying houses and starting small businesses in our community. And when people said, you know, Dallas isn't Paris, people aren't going to sit outside, I found out if you just make a place beautiful, you make it inviting and irresistible for people, we have the same ideas, the same desire to have these beautiful spaces again. It's not rocket science. It's not that difficult. Again, we can do it in a few hours. And so now we have a nonprofit. It's called Better Block. We have a website called betterblock.org. You can go to our website. We've got recipes for bike lanes, for building your own bocce ball courts for your own Italian plazas. But we've kind of come full circle. This is our office, actually. We're in a former gas station, so metaphorically, it's really fascinating for us. But we've kind of gone back into the IT world. This is our team. There's actually one person missing here, but we have an office actually in Akron, because we still do a lot of work there, and in Dallas. And so with our team, we've gotten really big into, full circle back into my IT world, into digital fabrication. And if anyone's familiar with digital fabrication, you probably hear the term 3D printing. Okay? And so we do 3D printing. We'll take your city blocks and we'll 3D print them. And the interesting thing is kids know how to use this technology amazingly. So as you guys know, your kids are better at their phones than we are. And so beyond that, even with their games they're playing, with Minecraft and things like that, they can go and build your entire community, like at an architectural level detail, and they can output it to a printer to print out. And so we work with other tools to actually start affecting the built environment that are also digital fabrication. One of the big ones we use is called a CNC router. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with this technology, but it's basically, imagine a printer for wood. You put a sheet of plywood on it, you download a file, this computer just starts cutting out these shapes, and you can make a lot of interesting things with the shapes that come together out of those pieces. So you just kind of puzzle piece. So one of the interesting things we found was a group in London that was making houses with the technology, with no glue, screws, or nails, just puzzle piecing it together. In fact, this is the future of fabrication. So we thought, well, man, if you can build houses with this, and they can upload it online, anyone can download this and make their own house. And they open source it, so it's freely available. So if you make a house with this, we can make all kinds of cool stuff. We can make everything in between. So we made a library called the WikiBlock Library that you can go to our website, you can download any of these designs, and you take a sheet of plywood, and you take it and you take it to either a maker space or a fab lab. You actually have probably a dozen CNC routers within, I would imagine, about a 5-mile radius of here. And if you go to a maker space, it's just basically like a gym full of tools that you take a membership out of. And you can use these things. And so these are just some of the designs that we have, just some seating options. But what happens is you put this file on a machine like this. You put this plywood down. You call up one of our designs. It starts cutting out these shapes. You go out and have a cup of coffee. You come back 45 minutes later, and you can make 2 chairs and a table out of a single sheet of plywood. No glue, screws, or nails. Puzzle pieces together. So we found if you can make 2 chairs and a table in 45 minutes, imagine what you can do in a week to a city block. So we've done a lot of things. We've made bus stops with cities. We've made bike racks and for businesses. We've copied Parisian kiosks that they put bulletin boards on to put all our notices about our kids' plays and our theater performances and movies and films. We've made community garden boxes and greenhouses. We've made bleachers so we make the baseball fields work in our neighborhood again. We made small business kiosks so we can have small businesses set up around the park, so we get little coffee displays or flower shops, or all those other little things with our neighbors again. Made putt-putt courses so we can have things for our kids to play with. We made trampolines in the park, and so these beautiful sidewalk trampolines that kids can jump on. This is a band shell we just made in Aberdeen, South Dakota about 2 weeks ago. This is one of our staff members, Zach, jumping. But again, no glue, screws, or nails. It just kind of friction fits together. This is a parklet. We're taking parking space that we saw those group in San Francisco were doing, taking those spaces, putting quarters in the meters, and turning them to parks. We said, well, we can one-up that, and we can make beautiful places that people want to linger in. Because, again, what we're lacking in the built environment is beauty. We've gotten so used to kind of this slowly, like frogs in boiling water, of degrading the built environment. But you know when you go back to that classic town square that you see that we built hundreds of years ago, you still love those spaces because we used to build with beauty in mind, and we've kind of gotten away from that. This is a geodesic dome that we built in front of our office just to show the possibilities. And if anyone knows the work of Buckminster Fuller, it's just 2 pieces of wood that interlock and with some tension on them to make a giant sphere. And we work with kids at high schools, and they can take these designs and they can cut them out themselves. And they can start fixing their own school courtyards. Well, they work in their city parks. This is in West Palm Beach, working with some neighbor kids, so they can actually add benches to their parks. And that better block that we started back in 2010, honestly, just because I wanted to have a place to get a cup of coffee and ride a bike on a bike lane in my neighborhood, started getting a lot of attention. And people started calling me from all over the country and saying, hey, we want to have a better block in our neighborhood. And I said, well, I don't have time to help. I'm an IT guy. But I'll make a website, and I'll post on a how-to guide so anybody can do this. We'll open source this and see whoever wants to share this knowledge, they can share, and we can learn from each other. And we started seeing better blocks happen all over the country. And the next year, it went around the world. It went all the way from Melbourne, Australia to Tehran, Iran. When I tell people in Tehran, Iran call me and ask about breaking laws, I was like, I don't know about breaking laws in Tehran, Iran. I think your stakes may be a little higher than ours. All right, if I go back to the trolley car story, because people ask, well, what happened with the trolley car? So this is a small board I'd had. There's actually a couple other members that weren't here in this picture, but this is us kind of in Portland studying their streetcar systems. And the civil engineer in the back is Luis Salcedo, one of my dear friends, a mentor of mine to this day. And there's Scott Griggs, who's our city council member I told you about as well now. But we're in Portland. We're meeting with their officials who brought their streetcar system back and said, you know, it's going to take you, it took us 20 years. It was a hard slog, but it's been worth it. We've seen a lot of development come because of this. We're seeing all kinds of new businesses coming back to our neighborhood. People are moving back in to wherever we span these out. And so it's been worthwhile. They started theirs in about 1990. And so we thought, okay, we'll go back to City Hall, and we'll go back home, and we said, you know, let's start applying for some grants and see if we can bring back our trolley car. And talked to the city of Dallas and said, can we apply for some grants? And they laughed at us. They said, okay, Oak Cliff Transit Authority, apply for all the grants you want. We had 0.3% chance of getting any money whatsoever. But what happened was we signed up for one grant called the Tiger Grant. First year it came out, and we won millions of dollars. And as opposed to taking 20 years to bring back the trolley car, we brought it back in 5 years. And all I did was build a website. But what happened was our community said, why not? Why couldn't we do this? And they rallied around this. And the thing is, when people were laughing at us all around the city and saying, good luck, Oak Cliff, you guys could never get a trolley car, that emboldened the community and said, well, why can't we? Why don't we deserve this? And we saw, and I tell people, beware of a dedicated group of amateurs, because we don't know what we're not supposed to be able to know. So we can make a lot of things happen in our community. So we saw a lot of things happen after that. Now we're seeing development come back, and people are moving back to our community. We started building more things with our neighbors and our residents that we helped do these better blocks. One of the things we started was a restaurant. In fact, you come to Dallas, please come to my restaurant. It's called Odd Fellows. You'll help put my kids through college. It'd be great. I started getting to lecture at Harvard. Got to have dinner with the First Lady. I decided to run for U.S. Congress because I had a free April. We were in the Venice Biennale, right? I thought, what can stop us? We found all these great ways to make a lot of things happen in our community rapidly by gathering them together and doing these things quickly. But the one thing that stopped me completely was in 2012, I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. And everything stopped. And at that point, I was like, okay, what was all this for? I'm not going to see my kids grow up. I'm not going to get to ride the trolley car we started. I'm not going to get to take part in these little businesses that we helped kind of seed with our neighborhood. And when I was at my sickest, people started knocking on my door and saying, hey, that I helped gather to the better block, said, hey, I want to help take your daughter to go out shopping, or I want to take your son to go fishing, or I want to fill up your fridge with food. And when I was at my sickest, and I could barely move, and anyone who's been through chemo knows what this is like, people started getting together in the neighborhood and saying, let's build a Better Jason campaign to fix me. So I tell people what I got out of all of this work. It wasn't bike lanes, it wasn't coffee shops, it wasn't streetcars, it wasn't fixing the theater. That was great, we loved that stuff. What I got was a neighborhood. And that's why we're doing everything that we do. That's why you guys are here right now. That's why you do the jobs you do. That's why you gather for the PTA meetings, you join the leagues or the clubs that you join. We all want places where we can thrive. We all want places that we can celebrate and grow old in. And say, look at what we built together. We want places we can put back on postcards again, that we can watch our kids do well and feel safe, and we can feel safe. And we can look back and say, look at what we created together. And before I forget, I was diagnosed as being cancer-free in 2014, so I'm going to be just fine. All right. So really, the takeaway here is, and I didn't expect to be the guy, honestly, to be on this stage. I'm very fortunate. I get to travel the world and tell this story and do work all over. I was in Baltimore yesterday starting a project. We've got one in Cleveland we're doing. But there's nothing special about me. I'm not the guy that made this work. It was the neighbors that made it work. You guys have all the tools and resources you need. You got everything you need to make that place you've always dreamed about. And we already know how to do it. We just need to get together, we need to set dates, and we need to get serious about saying, why are we here? Why are we doing all this? And that's it for me. Thank you, guys. Yeah, I think we can take a few questions as well, a few Q&A.
I believe we should have a microphone coming, Sean. I can't, they're coming out. So if anyone has a question for Jason or would like to make a comment, as soon as the mics get out there. They're coming? Well, thank you, Brian.
And if anyone wants to just shout out a question, you can do that as well. I can hopefully hear that. Where do you get the money for all this? Good question. I'll say those first couple projects actually we did for under $1,000, and we just passed hats around with our neighbors. So there's an interesting quote that I love, and it's from it's the mayor, former mayor of Curitiba, Brazil, who did a lot of amazing projects. And he said, honestly, if you want innovation, take a zero away from your budget. If you want ultimate innovation, take 2 zeros away from your budget. So I was like, well, how do you make things happen when you start taking zeros away from your budget? Well, you have to manage the equation of co-responsibility. And all that meant, I learned, was in that theater project. I didn't have $3 million, but I had 100 friends. And I had each of them paint a small art piece. So 100 people fixed that theater. And then whenever we opened it up, they all invited 6 extra friends. And so 700 people came out. And the thing is, that's how our cities all started. They all started as these little wood shacks and people getting together and helping each other build the other shacks next to each other. And then as things got more prosperous, they started making brick homes, and then they started using stone and making them better. What happens after time, if disinvestment occurs, then it becomes too expensive to kind of fix these giant buildings that we love, but we didn't have that starting point that we got that we really built our cities with, kind of this iterative process. And also I found too, every city has the same 2 problems. They don't have enough money, and it's the scale is too big. But some cities figure out ways to make things happen with those 2 issues, and some people just kind of say we can't do anything with that. So other things too that we found are important for our work is we try to borrow as much as we can. We found we have most of the excess capacity in our own garages with chairs and tables that no one's using that we had been putting out in the streets, excess cans of paint. And then we build. That's number 2. Like, what can we build together? And then lastly, if we have to, we'll buy. And that's when we kind of pass a hat around the neighbors and say, all right, what's important enough that we feel needs to be invested as a community? And so we'll try to raise the funds for that. Other questions? Yes, sir.
With all the trees and bushes and everything that you get brought out, I know those are cheap, and that gets back to the money thing.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that you had different businesses and such that would donate things to you? Did that help a lot?
Yeah, so the trees, interesting story. Actually, I was an IT consultant at a landscape architecture firm called SWA Group. And actually, to this day, I connect with landscape architects on every project we do. Because they're always doing these major projects. They're building hotels. And in fact, the group I was working with was actually building entire cities in China. And so I would go to them and say, well, why don't we fix our own neighborhood? And so they would be like, okay, well, we actually have some spare trees from a project we didn't use. Let's bring them over to this area. Or in one instance where we just wanted to temporarily test them out, they're like, we have trees on a truck ready to go for a fancy hotel on the north side of town. We'll have them go through our neighborhood, and we'll just have them kind of fall off the truck for the weekend. So, but that gets you to like, okay, well, when do you get trees? And people say, well, you're going to get trees in place. Well, who's going to take care of them? And so we'll have that. So, and you're going to hear this stuff all the time. Well, why we can't do these things because who's going to take care of it? And so what I found is that's the opportunity to actually seed a business. And so what I'll do with a project is like, how do we do a business, like a landscaping business? And their marketing is all about taking care of the trees and the space. So I always try to look at this public-private opportunities in these spaces. So if I'm going to fix the street, I'm going to put a bike lane in place. I might as well put a bike shop, so it works really well. If I'm going to make a great bulb out with cafe seating, that's a great opportunity for a coffee shop. And they're going to help each other out. The coffee shop's going to take care of the space, the public realm. We're going to get a great business that's going to activate this, that's going to help put as a restaurant owner, people don't realize, when you take away those small businesses, we provide the Little League t-shirts. We give, anyone here who has a small business knows this. You get asked all the time, and we're happy to do it. We wish if we could give more. But when you lose those small business opportunities, and we take those away, and we just replace them with these giant things, what we do is we actually hurt those small community groups that are actually being supported by our small businesses. So again, I like opportunities for us to put things out in the public realm that the small business can catalyze, take care of, and it helps their business, and it's helping us as a community together. Yes. Yes, sir.
Florissant isn't as big as Dallas, so where do we put a trolley park?
Oh, but what was the question though? Wait, what you put a what in place?
A trolley car or anything that you're building.
Yeah, well, so there actually is a community in Wisconsin, Kenosha, Wisconsin, if anyone knows Kenosha. I think it's 28,000 people. They brought their trolley car back. And so the way they did it, and this is the way, and I started down this path actually, they found that if you go with a historic trolley car, any city that actually, by the way, that had 30,000 citizens or more by about 1920 had a trolley car. You guys may have had one here, in fact. So Kenosha, Wisconsin had one at one point in time. So what they did was they just found the old tracks underground, because oftentimes we just covered up with concrete. And you can find old trolleys in kind of trolley graveyards all over. So they had a couple of guys pick up a few and start repairing them and turned it into a rolling museum. So it's a museum, and so the nice thing about it being a museum is all volunteer operated as well. It's a 501c3. So they found these creative ways to bring them back. So, and I want to say Portland's actually started off as a historic rolling museum, and then once they started getting more attention, people were using it, went over to modern as well. Other questions? In the back.
Yeah, I used to own a restaurant in St. Charles on a historical street.
In New Orleans?
No, in St. Charles, Missouri.
Okay.
And that street it's perfect. I mean, everybody knows, you know, St. Charles, Missouri, and Main Street down there. But the problem is, Hannibal had, which is an older city than St. Charles, had so deteriorated their city.
Yeah.
By putting modern buildings on Main Street in there. Disney came and they filmed a movie of Hannibal in St. Charles, Missouri, because it still had cobblestone streets. I mean, we were asked to take the neon out of our windows.
Wow.
You know, now you take an old city like Florissant, it's been here since 1700.
Yeah.
The city's been bastardized so bad. I mean, the Main Street, St. Ferdinand, there's very, very few old buildings on that street anymore.
Yeah.
How do you bring that back?
Yeah, well, obviously you can't just bring back an old building. Although I've had some projects where people said they've found some clusters of old buildings and said, why don't we move them? Which that's not happened yet, to bring it back to the main street. But one of the important things I would say is to get the form back, and I had to learn the importance of form. A walkable district needs buildings built back to the zero lot line, back on the sidewalk again. The problem with that, I found, and so there's people who are going to tell you two things they want in every project. Is the problem with our city, you're going to hear this all the time, is we don't have enough parking, and traffic goes through too slow. You hear that every single city. You want two things that are going to kill a great walkable district: put plenty of parking out there and make cars drive through fast. And that's what we do as cities. We respond to that. As a restaurant, I'm a restaurant owner as well. I learned all these philosophies that I'm like, oh, that are counterintuitive. We're going to complain about the drive and the parking and all those things. But at the end of the day, nobody likes to hang out in the parking lot. Nobody likes to be in those spaces. So I started taking away parking around my building and putting better cafe seating and more trees. People complain, but what happened was I looked at the numbers on my books, and we exponentially kept going up on our sales. So people were coming. So we have to be careful. And what happened, I guess, in what you're talking about, kind of that story is you killed the goose that laid the golden egg. Yeah, well, so what I found was, first of all, I started off the work assuming the city was kind of the bad guy. And then as I was doing the work, I realized that actually a lot of people that were in City Hall were former activists. And they kind of got through the bureaucracy, and they were just kind of got beaten down by that. And so oftentimes the calls we were getting to do projects were coming from people at City Hall. One guy was one of the economic development officers who said, you should go try to look in this one neighborhood here. We've been trying to work on this forever. We can't get anything done. So I found there's allies for making great things happen already in City Hall. But everything is local. You always start with the community. All the work you saw me doing with the kids, you know, to get in the punch cards and things like that, that was me getting together with a few other parents and saying, hey, no one's riding bicycles. Didn't we all ride bicycles? Yeah, we all rode bicycles. Well, why aren't they riding bicycles? Like, let's do something. So it was like a small cadre, about 5 of us, and going out, giving me these punch cards and sitting outside with the kids and cheering them on as they rode in. And as we built a much momentum and people got excited, we started seeing like 40 and 50 parents come out. And at that point, we actually had we had a quasi-governmental entity. And then we could go back to the city council member, and they're going to respond to this point like, oh, you guys have formed. And one of the things I didn't mention here, but all we really kind of do is all our projects is we kind of give it a name. So Bike Friendly Oak Cliff Transit Authority. We put it out there and say, we're this new organization, and we're excited about putting this out there. You start attracting people, and then the council will respond to that. They'll be like, oh, there's a new group in my neighborhood that I want to be supportive of. And as long as you're not too polarizing and you're doing this in a way, I mean, even people ask me, like, how'd you get breaking all those rules and stuff? And I was like, well, and not getting thrown in jail. And I said, in my neighborhood, we were worried about gunshots and things like that. So the police came by and they were like, neighbors are coming together putting flowers out and painting bike lanes. Like, that's fine. Like, we're okay with that. And I, had done a lot of goodwill with getting kids to ride bicycles and doing the theater work. So at that point, the city was kind of like, he's up to something weird again. But cool things keep happening, and people are wanting to move back to our neighborhood. So maybe we'll just kind of turn a little bit of a blind eye to it. And again, as long as your intentions are good, and people can see that, I think people recognize that we create bureaucracies over time. But I would start small with your community, build up, approach your council member, and then if you have problems through existing laws, they can work with the city staff to change those rules. We get things changed all the time now because people now recognize that things are broken. Any other? Oh, yes, sir.
Psychological question.
Yeah.
Basically, have you found any golden rule or method to deal with the naysayers?
Yeah, good question. So have I had any way to deal with the naysayers? So that's why we started the work. Started the work because I started going to community meetings, and we do these charrettes and these drawings, and when people would come up with ideas, and they would be like every polarizing person from the neighborhood would come out with every worst case scenario. Again, Carmageddon, end of life as we know it. And I'm just like, no one's riding bicycles, and cars are flooding through here. Like, I don't know if it gets any worse. Anything we do should make a difference. But I realized basically we had created platforms for naysayers with the way that we were engaging community. And I found there was a lot of people in the room. You had like 3%, which were these naysayers that were standing up. They were being the loudest, and they were kind of taking the mics. But there was this other 97% of the room that was kind of quiet and said, hey, we want to see things happen. I mean, I just want to get out and swing a hammer and start painting and just changing a light bulb. And that's how I was. It's like, I don't want to talk anymore. Like, I want to, again, a great place in 30 days, not 30 years. So what we did was I just gathered in the neighborhood and I said, let's get out of the city halls and town halls. Let's just go to the blocks. And let's walk around and let's do a little tour. We'll walk around and we'll take somebody who knows the neighborhood, somebody who grew up here. They can tell us the history. They'll know all about the old businesses and what used to exist. And then we'll start asking, like, well, what's wrong? What's missing? Why aren't people coming here? And then we get out of this abstract, the problem is, high infant mortality rates or something, which may be the real problem, but that's the giant multi-million-dollar problem. Like, but what's the problem like right here? Like, well, that light bulb is out, or that there's no shade tree here, there's sun kind of beaming down. We can tackle the big problems, but let's do little things together to get little wins, and then make a great place. And then hopefully that can start affecting the bigger problems, the systemic problems that we have as well. But you just can't take on a giant. Like, again, that's what was happening to me. People come up with these giant, massive systemic problems. Like, I need a little toehold win here because I don't have $30 million to fix the big problem right now. So that's the way. Get on the block, start describing the problem, gather your neighborhood, clean up graffiti together. Make punch cards for the kids, little things, and you'll build a movement faster than you realize. And people, at that point, the polarizing people will realize, like, and that's what I said, like, we're just doing these things temporarily. This could be the end of the world. It could be Carmageddon. We don't know. But let's just see what happens over a weekend. And I found that the naysayers never came out. We said, like, come out and you build it the way you think it should be. And they just wanted a place to stand on a box and yell. But when it came to actually, like, rolling up your sleeves and picking up a paintbrush and sweeping, like, they never came out for that. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So, thank you. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Like, we had a pet golf course. We had banding cages. All of those have left our area.
Yeah.
So the pet ranges are still there.
Yeah.
Deteriorating. Probably owned by somebody. Too expensive for average
Yeah.
How do you bring back some of that? That means life to the kids, that encourages young families to come in.
Yeah, yeah.
When you take all that away, you have to drive miles away to have that again.
Yeah, yeah.
The mall. We have had a beautiful mall, Jamestown Mall. It's not in Florissant boundaries.
Yeah.
But why can't we bring a mall back to that area?
Yeah.
Because businesses left, and nobody thinks this will ever be feasible to have that again.
Yeah, good question. So basically, the question is, you know, we had great things, and some of them started going away. Some of the batting cages and the putt-putt courses, and then owners would take over them, and we don't know how to access them anymore, and we don't know how do we get some of these great things back. So first of all, I'd say start with where you actually have some wins. Find areas where you're seeing some small businesses that are starting to work. I can tell you those small businesses need help. They are struggling, and they're trying to do everything they can. The retail environment's tricky right now, as we know, with Amazon and everything else. And start building around them. So reintroduce a small putt-putt course beside them, because you already have people kind of coming in and using this space. And start, again, I can tell you, your downtown, your city started at this little kind of main street. And there's little businesses that one person set up, and somebody set up next to them, and somebody set up next to them, and they kind of built together. And they had this kind of this symbiotic effect of helping each other out. So you build a coffee shop, it makes sense to build a bookstore. You build a bookstore, it makes sense to put in, you know, a movie house. You put a movie house, it makes sense to put in a, you know, just they all kind of go together. And so the problem is we've kind of grown, and then things kind of start breaking apart in different spots, right? And then it's hard to make any one of these one spots come together anymore because there's nothing kind of symbiotic working together. So again, find where you have the wins. I'm sure you've got a small local little cafe that people that are like starting to work. So start with like, how do we get them cafe seating outside? Then how do we get a little business next to them that works well with that? Then there's an empty field next to that. Let's do the putt-putt golf course there. Let's bring out some of those that are there. You'll be surprised that a lot of the property owners people will make assumptions about that I've found that they just don't want to help. Sometimes they're overwhelmed or they have lots of properties. So I'll go to them and be like, hey, can I take a weekend? And I have to figure out what are they worried about. They're worried about liability. So I'll take out an event insurance and I'll put them as an additional insured. I'll take out block party permits with the city. I found with a block party permit, you can pretty much break any rule you want because it's like a party, right? So, I mean, that's when the circus comes to town. So, I mean, come on. And so we use the tools that the city offers to try these things out. And then, again, build from a small center point again and grow out again. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we've done VR as well. She's talking about can you make your parks into virtual reality so people can kind of see them and walk them through there. Yeah, and that's great technology for people to kind of get an idea. Okay, the question is how many is too many people when we're starting to come up with ideas for a space. This is why I love doing the pop-ups. Because people come up with ideas all the time, like, great, you want to do this? You take care of that piece on this day on Saturday, you take care of this piece. And the people that are coming, there's a lot of ideas people out there. But it's that next level of actually implementing, that's a little harder. So, you know, if you do a pop-up version of whatever this is, you give a chance to kind of test out that idea. And the people that are coming with ideas, if they're not willing to actually take it to the next level, then you don't really have to worry about that at that point. Because those are the ones that need to own whatever that idea they put out in the ether. Yes, sir. Okay, good question. What are kind of the tenets of establishing an effective organization? I would say, first of all, and I make it so simple, you know, you give it a name. And you go in with a good design. So I created Bike-Friendly Oak Cliff. I created Oak Cliff Transit Authority. So, and then we've developed a website so people can, and we made it look official. You saw it look like a professional website. You can buy these templates for $20 that make it look professional. That inspired our neighborhood to be like, wow, that's next level. We didn't overmeet. We had a lot of fun. In the end, we threw a lot of parties with the neighborhood, celebrating. We threw block parties just because we needed to connect people. So what I found into the Better Block process, what the magic really is to make things happen in a city is you need people connecting and talking to each other. So we had city staff that didn't know residents. We had residents that didn't know property owners. We had property owners that didn't know elected officials. So with our work, we basically said we brought them out to block parties. And we said, this is something we want to do, and had them all talk about it, and it helped us kind of come up with the ideas together, but we had fun. We made sure, like you saw like the group rides I did. I was like, let's all go out and we'll follow the trail of Lee Harvey Oswald. It's like, it was irreverent. People ask me, is there any place you can't fix? I said, you can fix any place with alcohol. So we just bring beer, and just people would just come out together in droves, because we'd make a beer garden. And we had fun with it. When things started getting stodgy and too official, people start dropping off. If there's too many meetings, you'll get into analysis paralysis. I found out early on when I was starting, I'd be like, okay, I'd start the first initiative, I have 50 people come out, like, cool, we got a project. I said, let's have another meeting next week. We have 25 people the next meeting. And the next meeting, next week we'd have 12 people. The next meeting there'd be 3. I'm like, oh my gosh, I guess nobody wants this. Well, yeah, I had to be mindful of people's time. People actually wanted to get involved, but I couldn't overmeet. So I had to figure out ways to make it simple for them to engage. Do they have kids? Yes. Okay, let's work with their kids, and we'll do an event at 7 o'clock after school. We'll do an outdoor movie for the kids, and the parents can kind of be off to the side, and we'll kind of have a planning session. So have fun with it. Recognize how people want to be involved, but make it easy for them to get involved. Any other questions? Yes, at the very back, sir. Okay.
The business owners who own all these strip malls and said need a building set empty. It seems like they were trying to do something to increase business to get people to take these storefronts up. Is it because of the rent possibly? They're not wanting to rent to get businesses in there? That's the first part. The next part is maybe should we like look into changing our building codes to make our strip malls look more like a strip, something different than a shoebox turned upside down with doors on it. And the last question is, everything you showed was always like with business strips and this. How do you get your residential area? Because a lot of Florissant is residential area.
Yeah.
A lot of it is rented. And how do you get where those people and everybody in the community wants to pitch in together?
Yeah, okay. So to answer your first part of your question, yes. Policy needs to be looked at. Is the zoning, has it been changed so that property owner is too restrictive to make creative new uses out of the space? For instance, I found out with when I was doing my shop, I had to have 1.5 car parking spaces for every 100 square feet. And I was like, well, we're not. And then I was also, they started taking away fabrication, and we don't want to have fabrication uses. Well, nobody planned for the idea of digital fabrication, which is a totally different type of model when you think of fabrication. So when you cut that option off, it actually restricts these new technologies and new ways to make things happen in our community. So I had to go to the city council members and be like, we need to work around these things because it's too restrictive at this point. So yes, on the policy side, there may be a lot of things that can't happen on those centers, and they can't use these spaces the way they would like to see them be activated because it's too restrictive or too overregulated. Yes, on the readdressing the frontages and recladding them. If you see what's happening now, and I imagine it's happening, and I haven't spent a lot of time in St. Louis itself, but imagine if you look at even the warehouse districts, they're probably painting murals on the buildings, they're adding string lights outside, they're making beer gardens out in the front, they're making these irresistible pedestrian spaces out in the front, they're adding some landscaping as well. And so there's lessons to be learned in all of these spaces with these creative, adaptive reuses of those spaces. It's not hard to make places beautiful and irresistible. And in fact, people ask me, like, how do I make a place irresistible for people? Like, say, just make it feel romantic. And what people do is they put string lights out, they put cafe seating out, they have food out, they'll put some music on, and we're like, well, why aren't we doing this for all our places? This is the places we all want to be in. The places that people love in your community are the ones that take all their wedding photos, by the way. And you'll see that. You know what they are right now. I'm sure you're thinking like, oh yeah, it's where we see everyone take their graduation photos and their wedding photos. And then we have to ask the question like, well, why aren't we building a lot of those? Those should be ubiquitous. So I would say start paying attention to the places that you love throughout the region, actually, even around the world. And that's what I was doing. I was trying to reverse engineer that classic German beer garden. Like, what is it I love about this space? Or that classic London High Street. Or when I was in Johannesburg, I see these great markets. Like, what's about this market I love? Or the Zocalo in Mexico City, that's this great public space. Or the mercados, or the long paseos. Like, why are these so magnetic? And how do I infuse that back into our communities? The last question you had was, I'm sorry, I didn't answer that.
Most of the property in Florissant is residential area.
Okay, how do you get the renters involved?
You have, you're getting a big majority or a big group of renters in.
Yeah.
The residential areas are not really taking care of the area.
Yeah.
How do you get them involved to understand, hey, let's all take care of this and keep this community moving back?
Yeah, I don't know if I have the direct answer for that, but what I would say, probably many of them have kids, and so I work with the kids. In fact, I found the kids are great at like my kids, for example. I wasn't good at recycling, and so the school implemented this recycling program, and so my kids would come home and they shamed me so much on how I was like, "You're not wrapping this up well. You're not doing this right, Dad." And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And so figure out ways, especially renters, I would say, they're probably in a little different state. First of all, they may have to work 1 or 2 jobs. They're not bringing in as much income. They're probably having a harder time even trying to find ways that are free and easy and simple to engage with their families on their off time. So again, that's where I talked about offer invitations for those communities to take part in this in a way that is accessible for the problems and the restraints that they're dealing with. Because I think we've all been there. I was in my 20s and I was a renter and I struggled and my kids were really young and I was like, I need free activities for my kids. So I was at the park all the time and trying to come up with these things. And so if anybody offered like any kind of like olive branch out that was like, hey, we're going to do this one event, like we flocked to that thing. So that's, and again, I'm not really answering your question directly, but I think understanding kind of the issues that they face and how you make their lives a little easier is probably the direction I would go. Yes, sir.
Is there a way you communicate with the municipality? You get the mayors involved, the council, and have them get people involved, or did you do that?
So I did that work along with my residents and neighbors, but I would do things though like let's bike to City Hall, and I'd tell the mayor, we're all going to bike to City Hall. I want you to talk for 15 minutes, and they're like, oh man, okay. And so it was like, so I'd have like 100 neighbors all ride out, and so it was a bit of a, them recognizing the community is gathering, and we've kind of built a little army here, and they wanted to be on the side of that. But I'd say it started with me gathering the neighborhood and the residents and showing that there's a desire. Yeah.
With having the Wednesday nights out, things like that.
Yeah.
So they started doing that, but there's not probably this many people that show up. It's not, last night was a big event.
Yeah.
But there's so many other things that stall people in our city. There's ideas people have.
Yeah.
You can't use that color paint, you can't take on this stuff. All the restrictions.
Yeah.
And your ideas are great, but where do you start? Where we have our main street is, I would consider St. Francis our main street. But there's so many things that don't fit together through the whole place.
Yeah. Well, so what I did, again, all of our work started as temporary. And then I'd also frame it in the world of art as well, because when things would say like, well, you can't do this, you can't build this structure. If I said, well, it's an art piece, like, oh, well, art for some reason gets a pass. And so I found that temporary thing, if we did a good job, and we made it beautiful, and it was designed well. Like you saw that park that we designed now that's like this beautiful space. Parklets technically aren't legal in Dallas, but ours is so well done and so well designed, the city said, well, that thing, we'll let it pass. So I found, and again, we said it's just temporary, but it's been so loved and so well used by the community, it stays up. And I would say there's probably a lot of things in cities. You see, the Eiffel Tower was a temporary installation by Gustave Eiffel. It was only supposed to be up for a short time. It was supposed to be removed. And it was loved by a lot of people. It was actually not loved by everybody, but it was loved by a lot of people and ended up staying. So I would say use this, work with your Main Street merchants and just test out some ideas temporarily and say, let's just put this up for 30 days. It's going to go away. But again, my ulterior motive was if we do it well enough, maybe it'll stick. And it will inspire the community, because if the community sees, hey, we love this thing, and hundreds of people are using this, it will definitely stay. Yes, ma'am.
How do you, like St. Charles, the great thing about that is developing is it's a beautiful place, but now things are becoming so expensive. The buildings that are empty are now $500,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you stop that? How do you stop a community, even our downtown, St. Ferdinand, it's becoming, buildings are emptying, but they're going to insurance companies and banks.
Yeah.
You don't make a community out of it. You can go see your insurance agent, but you can't go to a restaurant there. Nobody can afford the building.
Yeah.
How do you stop that type of development to the point where it's not affordable for a small cafe to go in, it's not affordable for a bookstore to go in, because you can't sell enough books to pay $2,000 to $3,000
Oh, yeah.
rent every month.
Yeah.
So how do you stop that from happening?
Yeah.
There's a small project in our area that we've been trying to do. There's a park between our neighborhoods. It's a huge, beautiful development, gave it to the city and there, but you can't get to it.
Yeah.
They closed off all the accesses to the park. And somebody says, well, you can't tell a house to put a fence where that entrance used to be to not give up their land.
Yeah.
But that's the thing that's wrong. I mean, how do you stop the development to the point where nobody can afford to rebuild a small community building area?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, really, the core of it is the gentrification question. So when people, and really it's a market issue. Like when an area starts kind of to flip, what happens is you just get this kind of, for desirable spaces, when we make them good, the places that people want to be in, they become very popular. And where we lack so many of those places, they become saturated really fast. And that saturation kicks in with market forces in a big way. So there's a couple things to that. With a market, obviously, the two things you have to think about is supply and demand. So what the fear is, people will say, well, let's not do this. Let's keep our area kind of not so wonderful, and that way prices won't go up. What should happen, though, as I think we all know, is like we all deserve great places. Everybody should have amazing parks, and everybody should have amazing streets, and bike infrastructure, and coffee shops, and bookstores, and the places that we love to linger as a neighborhood. So if you increase the supply as a response to that demand, that should hopefully level the market forces to a degree. But the other thing is, right now, since I imagine in your community you don't have that major kind of uptick happening in pricing all over to a scale that's untenable. That's an opportunity, I think, to work with. We've developed CDCs in communities, as we recognize that with the better block process, we're getting cool things happening, and people want to move to these areas. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the CDC. It's Community Development Corporation. It's a chance for to work with the cities and start land banking and grabbing some of these buildings and start. What happens is as the taxable value goes up, it kind of works with that to kind of keeps the prices down, and you can kind of the CDC can actually put an ethos in place and say our values are we love the arts and we love this culture in the community. We want to make sure these buildings stay available to these spaces. So in these communities that we're working with, we're working heavily with kind of developing these CDCs and capturing these spaces now. So if we do things to make them great places that people love, we maintain that affordability that is definitely needed. But then we'll also work, and this is kind of why I'm getting into kind of the digital fabrication. I recognize I have a house in my neighborhood. And my kids are 15 and 17 years old, so they're not far from leaving. And I don't need that much space anymore. It's about 1,800 square feet. So I'm looking at building a tiny home in my backyard. So we're actually getting the granny flat rules changed, because we used to have granny flats throughout our community. You guys may have had the same issues, and some of those rules were taken out. The nice thing about a granny flat does two things. It can create an affordable housing unit for somebody else, and I have my family there, so somebody who's maybe starting off after college has a small space that they can start in. But and again, the digital fabrication is for me to build that structure for them. Or it's for me, when my kids are gone, I don't want to take care of 1,800 square feet, honestly. I can just take this little space, and I'd rather just go travel and do fun things and give my house over to a family. And then they can be paying rent, so I can stay in my house at this point. So I think creating these ways for people that live in these spaces to not only to stay there, but also use this as an investment that gives back to them, so that they can, if it starts growing, increasing in value, that they can create affordable options for other people in that space. But I don't have the complete answer for you, because it's a very complex question of what gentrification and what it does. But again, there are tools within cities that you see, again, with CDCs being one of the biggest, to help mitigate that a bit.
Jason, let's think we'll take one more question, and then I think
One
there's
more
a
question, okay.
gentleman in the
This has
back.
been great. I do Q&As all the time, and I've never had like 30 questions afterwards. So this is wonderful, guys. You guys are amazing. It sounds like there's a pent-up demand to have cool things happen, and so that's great. Sir, I'll take yours as the last question. Back.
So we have some, I think this is kind of cool because we have a great canvas for this in the State Science Center. And then some of our social media groups, they put, somebody put out a survey. What does Florissant need? They want Trader Joe's, Chick-fil-A,
Yeah.
but all these big box type franchises, even things that are like 5 miles away, we need to pull so you know what the next step is.
Yeah, yeah.
What really does help the community is something that could be like a good used bookstore. How do you attract those, people, entrepreneurs, come in and open things up?
Oh, well, I mean, well, first of all, I would maybe ask the room real fast. Just raise your hand, anybody here who's ever dreamed of opening their own business? So you've got more than 50% of the room here wants to be an entrepreneur, has always dreamed of it. I found that in every better block that exists. So it's all right here. That's what I kind of talk about. So the first part of that question is, how do you find it? It's there. The second of all, when you find people want to do these things, and again, this is why I kind of love that pop-up model. We started, like we wanted to do a bookstore. So what we did is we went to our friends. We found people that loved books in our neighborhood that said there was always 3 or 4 that wanted to start a bookstore. So we said, okay, why don't we'll put out an email. Everybody put out 10 books in your front yard and in a box, and we're in the neighborhood, and we're going to drive around our truck, let us know where they are, and we're going to pick them up, and we're going to take all those books, and we're going to turn that into an instant bookstore. Because we can all give up 10 books. It's not that big of a deal. And so that's how we made the used bookstore. That's how we got that going. And so that's the thing is, I think everybody in the community realized we all want this. And then also we wanted Joe on the block or Linda and the community. We wanted them to be successful because we realized that they were going to be the ones that had to sit there and take care of this. And so when we recognized how valuable that was, we did everything we could to support that. And then we were like, we're going to help. We, as the neighbors, we volunteered to work in the shops regularly. In fact, there's one of our most successful shops, the small art space for the art supplies and art classes for kids in the neighborhood. Well, all our kids needed things to do after school. We had these 2 moms that wanted to help. And so they always wanted to start their own art supply store. So they started it, and they did these classes. And they couldn't afford it to start, so we all volunteered, and we all worked at their desk for them as well. And now they're going gangbusters, and they're an anchor, and they're doing well. But if you want it as a community, and you see it's there, and you see there's a theme rising up, what you're talking about as a shop is, by the way, it's called a third place. Anyone's heard this term? And that's what's missing probably in the community, or you don't have enough of these places. A third place is, you think of first place is your home, second place is work, and a third place is this kind of this extension of the community living room that people love to linger in. Oftentimes it's a coffee shop, it's the barber shop, it's the bookstore. And we used to have a lot of those. And so, and right now we're replacing them with chains that are basically these just operations that are from these entities that nobody knows outside of the area. They're not buying the Little League t-shirts. They're not doing all the other cool stuff, the programming in the neighborhood, all that stuff. They're just kind of these things that make a pretty good piece of chicken. But once we recognize as a community that we need these third places, I think we get together and we start contacting our neighbors and we say, okay, who wants to start these things? And we help together, working with the city, like where are there buildings available? Where there's this way that we can bring all this energy together, recreate a center, and then how do we get started? And I think that you guys are on that path now.
I hope we're on the right line.
Yeah.
So please continue to give Jason a round of applause. That was wonderful. So before we go, we do have a couple gifts for you from the city. But I do want to thank you all for coming. And when you leave, you're going to be given like a business-sized card. And it is for a survey. And we really want your feedback. I just want to tell you, you have a council that is working very hard to try to make changes in here. And a city that is going to move forward. But what it is we need you, and we need the community, and we need help. And as Jason said, it's amazing when you think small, how many big things can happen when the community all pulls together. So please Timmy's gonna
Thanks, sir.
present him
Ah,
with just a few things from
Thank
our
you.
little
ah.
parts of Florissant. And
What's up?
Mayor?
I was racking my brain, what would a mayor give to a speaker from Dallas? It's probably the 100th one that he's received. It's the key to the city.
All right. This is my first key to the city, actually. Thank you.
Again, thank you all for attending tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely.